Welcome into the Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA, women's college hoops, oh so much more. Mia O'Brien, Mitchell Northam. We bring you the very latest when it comes to the wide world of women's basketball, almost said college, all of women's basketball. I say that to say, Mitch, I'm sure there's a couple of you who are just tuning in for the first time as the WNBA season enters week 3. How are you, my friend, on this fine Tuesday that we are recording on?
I'm good. Done a lot of traveling the past week, so I'm happy to just enjoy my home for a little while. I went to Minneapolis for like a 24-hour trip basically to see PaigeBueckers play, and we'll talk about that later. And then I drove down to Columbia, South Carolina, not to see DawnStaley, but to see South Carolina softball team play UCLA in the NCAA tournament, which was also a lot of fun. And so now I'm back in the Triangle and I'm chilling.
I was going to say, I'm sure you were very excited to not get in a car for an extended period of time or a plane ride well, are you going to go? You're not going to the College World Series then?
I am not. No,
Okay.
I will be covering that from this here office, and just chilling until I have a trip to Maryland later in June. But yeah,
nice, very nice, very nice. Well, very excited to hear about your trip to see PaigeBueckers live in action, powered by a certain paint company. I'm excited to get into the very latest when it comes to that. But first, as we do each and every week here on the Women's Basketball Podcast, we begin with our Her of the Week. This one's a fun one, Mitch. A couple weeks ago, we broke down Full Court Press, the second season of ESPN's hit series. Of course, one of the 3 stars of this year's season, Kiki Iriafin, formerly of both USC and Stanford. Somewhere Dejanay Carrington is punching the air. Kiki Iriafin, in her first 5 games as a professional, 4 double-doubles. She is the first player since 1999 to do so in the W. Natalie Williams did it back in 99. We especially love the Washington Mystics, the youth movement that they have brought, and the Princeton offense. So something tells me we're going to circle back at some point in the program to one of the happy upstarts, we'll call it, in the W so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about Georgia Amore, coming into the season, and unfortunately she got hurt and is not playing. But these other 2 first-round picks are panning out pretty well for the Washington Mystics. Just on Kiki Iriafin real quick, she's 3rd in the league in rebounding right now with 11.2 per game. And her scoring, like she's doing it pretty efficiently. She's shooting 51% from the floor, which is 20th in the league, which is pretty good. Sonia Citron, Kiki Iriafin, the Mystics hit on 2 big ones there. It seems, small sample size, still early in the season, but the returns have been very good on those 2 players.
And speaking of people punching the air, certainly the Chicago Sky wondering, maybe we shouldn't have dealt away that top 5 pick if we could have gotten one of these youngsters.
Indeed. Maybe we should have held on to our draft pick.
And I also think that there's something to be said real quick, Mitch, before we segue into this week's starting 5. If you are Lindsay Gottlieb, do you look at the 1 year that Kiki had at USC? I don't want to say as a failure, but as, wow, we didn't even get what we thought we'd get out of her, of what she's getting out of her first 5 games as a pro.
Well, I think if I was Lindsay Gottlieb, I would try to spin Kiki Iriafin this way to recruits. I would say to them, look, she came here for 1 year and look at what she's doing right away in the WNBA. Look at how we developed her in a way that she did not at Stanford. That's how I would spin it if I were Lindsay Gottlieb and I was trying to attract potential other good players in the portal. That's just me. Not to say that Kiki Iriafin didn't develop at Stanford. She was very good there as a junior. But I think certainly maybe, if she had stayed at Stanford, she would have been the number 1 option far and away. And frankly, as we saw this season, Stanford was not a good team. They did not make the NCAA tournament for the first time since Ronald Reagan was president. I think that would have been maybe detrimental to Kiki Iriafin's growth. She goes to USC, and she gets to play with a star in Juju Watkins and some other really good players when you talk about, Rhea Marshall and Talia von Oelhoffen. Like, learns maybe perhaps how to play alongside other really good players, and how can I use my skill set to complement these other people instead of being like, I'm the number one option, I have to do everything. I think some of that is translating now to what we're seeing with the Mystics. But yeah, certainly, I mean, she's off to a good start this season. And yeah, if I was Lindsay Gottlieb, there's been a thing made about how Stanford did not include some players.
Point of clarification, that is where the slight dig at Dejanay Carrington goes.
Yeah, they have not included some players who have transferred away from Stanford on their sort of like best of luck in the WNBA graphics. Look at our WNBA alums. If I was Lindsay Gottlieb, I would claim Kiki Iriafin as a USC Trojan every step of the way.
Will that be the beef of the week? We'll get to that here in just a second. But first, it's on to this week's starting five, the five biggest storylines in women's basketball. Mitch, start us off with your trip up to Minneapolis to see the Lynx, the Wings, Paige, and her homecoming to the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, so I got the chance to, fly to Minneapolis. Shout out to Sherwin Williams, who brought some media members up there for this trip to cover PaigeBueckers' homecoming game in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. First time she's played in that arena since she lost the 2022 national championship game to South Carolina when she was a sophomore at UConn. That was also the last time I was in Minneapolis. And I just have to say, I want Minneapolis to host more Final Fours and like more big events. Like,
well, they're doing the Big Ten tournament and they've done it to some rousing success.
Yeah, I like Minneapolis a lot. Like, just as it's a walkable city. I like the cold, so I prefer that as well. I think it's a good arena for those type of big events. That aside, really good crowd there. It was a Wednesday night game, Lynx Wings. Really good crowd there. My kind of takeaways from just like watching, the game and watching these two teams play was, number one, I think Nafisa Collier, and we could get into this more later, with Caitlin going out now with an injury, I think she is your front runner for MVP so far this season. Again,
nice
like small sample size, we're only a week or two into the season. But I think she's even favored now at some sports books. She's just putting up really big numbers. She is definitely the bus driver for that team, and like does it in a lot of different ways. She can score, she can rebound, she can defend. She does all the things. So that's first and foremost for her. The Lynx look great. They're going to figure out like some kinks and stuff along the way, but I expect them to make a deep playoff run again. Paige, I think, is figuring it out and settling into her own. I think as a pro player, this was her first career double-double, which was cool. She got it with assists. I think 12 points and 10 assists was her final stat line. They kept it close with the Lynx up to the end. And then my last takeaway is like, I don't think the roster that the Wings have as currently constructed is going to win you a lot of basketball games. I think it's kind of weird, just sort of like how they're using some of their players. As we've talked about a lot on this podcast, like I think the Wings don't want the ball in Arike Ogunbowale's hands a lot, but that's what keeps happening in every game. She gets the ball in her hands a lot and she takes a lot of shots. And Paige has been a type of player throughout her college career that is willing to defer, in terms of an offensive player and pass the ball off to, her teammates and stuff like that and set up other players. And it's just not really working, I think, with Arike Ogunbowale. And sort of the conclusion that I came to is like, okay, we've seen Arike in the WNBA now for 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. She was drafted in 2019, fifth overall.
2019. And has never really been on a very successful team. And I wonder if we've reached the conclusion that like you cannot win a championship or maybe even have a consistent playoff team with Arike Ogunbowale as your best player. And I know that worked at Notre Dame. She plays pretty much the same way as she did in college. But college and pro games are a little bit different. Everybody's really better in the WNBA than they were, back in the ACC and Big East days, when Notre Dame was playing, when she was there. And I'm just not sure if that's a recipe for success in the WNBA. She just really takes up a lot of offensive energy on a team. She takes a lot of shots. She has the ball in her hands a lot. And Paige hasn't really played alongside a player like that while she's been in college. And I'm just not sure that works. And I wonder when Dallas is going to come to that conclusion and when they might say, okay, if we're moving in this direction with Paige, then we need to move Arike into another direction to another team.
Yeah. So in case you missed last week's episode, the analogy that I threw out there when it comes to the Dallas Wings was the first half of the 2024 Indiana Fever season. And you could make an argument that there were points in that first half of the season where the idea of could the backcourt marriage of CaitlinClark and Kelsey Mitchell work? And obviously in the second half of the season, when they caught fire, they make the postseason for the first time in eons. There was an argument to be made that they were playing like one of the best backcourts in the country. And so I don't want to write off Arike and Paige as a pairing, because I also think that Arike and Kelsey Mitchell are two very different players. And certainly in Indiana's case, CaitlinClark had Christy Sides as her head coach in her rookie season, who was essentially trying to just, I don't want to say coach the scorer out of her, but make her a passing first point guard. Paige, I think, already has some nuance to her game where she's already pretty balanced, whereas we know Caitlin certainly could dish it out at Iowa, but she was known for her scoring prowess. I think that it's different in that regards, but I also think the bigger difference between the two is Kelsey Mitchell certainly has the green light. We've seen it so far through 2 weeks of the Fever season in 2025, but I don't think it's to the extent of Arike Ogunbowale's leash that it has been the last 6 years in Dallas.
Yeah, Arike has had just the green light for her entire career, even going back to her days at Notre Dame. So I kind of wonder if the adjustment for her is a little bit more difficult. Like, you were this great player in college, you were a national champion. You've hit the buzzer beaters. You've been among the league's leading scorers since you've been in the W. You've been an all-star, all the things. So I wonder, whereas Kelsey Mitchell, maybe it was a lither bit easier for her to sort of shift her mindset and say, you know what, I am better as a number 2 to Caitlin, or a number 3 to Caitlin and Aaliyah, or whatever it might be. Whereas like Arike, she's been this player for forever. And
she's been the face of the Wings for 6 years.
Yeah, and I just don't know if that works alongside PaigeBueckers. I'm going to read you Arike Ogunbowale's field goal shooting mark so far this season.
Folks, for those keeping score at home, the stat line that Mitch is about to read off is for a player who at the All-Star break last year was the number 2 scorer in the league behind only Asia Wilson.
And so far this season, we have a 4 of 12 shooting. We have a 2 of 14. We have an 8 of 20, and we have a 2 for 10 in her latest game, that loss at the Atlanta Dream. So I just, it's not only that like it looks disjointed and stuff with Paige and like it doesn't always work, but Arike also just isn't playing well, isn't shooting well, isn't, and she's getting the volume, but the shots aren't going in. And to me, that's just not a recipe for the Dallas Wings. The other kind of weird thing I think about the Wings roster is like they seem committed to playing these like 3 forwards and no true center. They're playing Alyssa Smith, Dejanay Carrington, and Myisha Hines-Allen, and all those players are very talented and very great. But you also have Tierra McCowan on your bench, and I just like, if you're not gonna start her, like you might as well trade her. Like I don't really know what the purpose is of just like bringing her off the bench and playing her 15 minutes a game. So I wonder, I'm keeping my eye on Dallas kind of as the season goes. Number 1, just to see if they make any roster adjustments. And then number 2, just kind of keeping an eye on Paige, because this is going to be probably the first time in her career ever playing basketball that she's going to have to deal with a lot of losing and a lot of losses. And I kind of wonder like how that will affect sort of her play and her psyche and her feelings going forward, and her feelings about the Dallas Wings organization and all those things. Because the Wings are already 0-4. I believe that's more games that UConn lost all this past season. I think UConn had 3 losses. So yeah, it's going to be a tough first season, I think, for Paige in Dallas.
Now, I should note as we move to number 2 in this week's starting 5, Mitch, that we were saying the same thing about CaitlinClark and the Indiana Fever 1 year ago today. We were saying, oh my goodness, they're 2-8. How is she going to handle a team that's in rebuilding mode? This is not a 1-year fix. And then you look up 4 or 5 months later, and the Indiana Fever are in the postseason. And so that's where I'm very curious to see what happens with the Wings. I don't think the two situations mirror each other exactly. But as we progress in this week's starting 5, yes, we do pivot now to CaitlinClark, who will miss at least the next 2 weeks with a left quad contusion. Mitch, I was actually doing a variety of different things around the house when this news broke. And the fact that I was cooking and I overheard on SportsCenter a breaking news about CaitlinClark coming up after the break. Number 1, bodes very well for women's basketball. We love that on the Women's Basketball Podcast. We don't love Caitlin's injury. I did like the comments from Steph White this week and this idea of, hey, star players don't usually come to you and say, hey, something doesn't feel right. And when the trainer conducts an MRI and then the results say you have to sit out 2 to 3 weeks, the star player usually fights it. But Caitlin, I guess, ultimately said, okay, this is what's best for me because I would rather be healthy come September. The big question mark, of course, is how will the Fever play, Mitch, without CaitlinClark running the show?
Yeah, I kind of think I'm going to preface this by saying I wish that CaitlinClark didn't get hurt, and I wish her well in her recovery, and we never want to see players injured.
I do want to note she was at practice today. Like, she's there, and she's like still throwing a basketball over. Like, she's fine. This is very much a precautionary injury, folks.
It's very much a small thing. It's a quad strain. We don't like seeing players injured. Whatever. I think that this could be a little bit of a blessing in disguise on a couple levels. Number 1, I think it's good for just the ecosystem of women's basketball and media and stuff. We've had a lot of takes and a lot of thoughts about CaitlinClark lately. And as we've said before on the show, CaitlinClark sometimes makes people stupid. And so I think just to have a nice break from Caitlin mania for 2 weeks would be a good refresher and reset after the Angel Reese incident and the mania of it all. I saw that Christine Brennan tweeted something where she said,
well, stop right there. Christine Brennan tweeted, and it's women's basketball. Okay.
And
all right, continue.
She asked the league office for comment about CaitlinClark's injury, which is a quad strain. Let me just repeat, it's a quad strain. She didn't break her foot. She didn't tear her ACL. She didn't get a concussion. Like, this is a pretty minor thing. And just the thought to ask the league office for comment about a player's quad strain is just the wildest thing to me. So that's another example of, like, we all just need to take a beat on the CaitlinClark stuff. On the other end of this, why I think it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise is I think it will give Stephanie White the chance to feel out her roster a little bit more. There's a lot of new pieces that the Fever added this season. Who is the player that they turn to a point guard when Caitlin gets into foul trouble or when Caitlin has a little knock like this or whatever it is? It seems like they're going to start Sydney Colson. We'll see how that goes. It also seems like they might play Sophie Cunningham a little bit of the point guard, which is going to be an interesting experiment. I think early on in this season, you're still in May, still have a lot of time to figure things out. There's no point right now in rushing Caitlin back or, playing her through something that, might seem minor, but could get worse if you put too much on it. I think this could be a blessing in disguise for the Fever and for all of us as women's basketball fans as a whole.
Yes, I am especially excited, Mitch, and I had put this on our rundown for last call, but let's hit it now. Aaliyah Boston is 11th in scoring in the WNBA as we record this podcast. I think Aaliyah has looked awesome to the point that I've had more than one friend say, all right, you need to shut up about Aaliyah's lack of offensive firepower at times in 2024. I think that Unrivaled was great for her growth, especially her ability to create her own shot, quite frankly, while dribbling in the paint, around the arc, which is something we really didn't see in her game. And certainly when you think about the great centers that Iowa trotted out alongside CaitlinClark, the way that Jan Jensen coaches those posts is to not dribble the ball. And so in the second half of the 2024 season, a lot of Aaliyah's production simply came from waiting there in the post for Caitlin to feed her and then just putting it up for a layup. And that was the Iowa model. And the fact that Aaliyah Boston is an evolved version of the traditional Iowa post, I think is a major development for when CaitlinClark does come back. And also, quite frankly, I think we need to have a conversation of, yes, she is going to be a factor to make the Team USA when the Olympics come calling.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, she does deserve respect to be a top 25 player here in the year of our Lord, 2025.
Yeah, Leah Boston in her third WNBA season now. She is 11th in scoring, 4th in rebounding, 2nd in blocks, 5th in field goal percentage, shooting 60.8% from the floor. So, yeah, this is, she's playing the best basketball of her career, I think, so far. You can count the South Carolina years in that. She's playing awesome. And, yeah, like you said, I think she's somebody who we talked about before, like, the younger guard maybe pushing out the older guard when it comes to Team USA. I think they're going to have to make some decisions, like when, 2028 rolls around, are you going to stick with the older veterans like a BritneyGriner, or are you going to go young and go Aaliyah Boston? And I think right now I'm taking Aaliyah Boston.
I would too.
Even right now, and I think as we get closer to 2028, like those two sides are only going to go one way. So she's been awesome. And yeah, this will give her the chance to kind of shine a little bit too. Like, she played all last season with Caitlin. What is it going to be like now playing without Caitlin, but with Kelsey Mitchell in the role that she's in now, and with Sophie Cunningham and with Lexi Hall and with Tawana Bonner? Like, I think it's going to be interesting to see, and we'll get into this in our chef's table, what that team is going to look like later this week.
Our thoughts, of course. Awful injury. I'm just kidding. We hope Caitlin is feeling okay after the quad.
She'll be fine.
She's going to be fine, folks. Everybody take a deep breath. It is worth noting, and I said this on my radio show today, Mitch. It is astounding. I don't care what pro sport we're talking about, that she has not missed a game due to injury since she was a sophomore in high school 7 years ago. It is astounding. And that's why I think it is a novelty for so many. Let's keep it moving with this week's starting five. Some thoughts from the college ranks, Mitch.
Yeah, so I think this was kind of the last big domino to fall in terms of the transfer portal stuff. KayleighHeckel, who was a freshman at USC this past season and, kind of had a bit of an off the bench role. I think she played about 15 minutes per game. She was somebody who played really well, actually, when Juju Watkins went down with her injury. She finished that game against Mississippi State with 13 points, 6 assists, and 2 steals in the win for the Trojans. She went into the transfer portal. She's somebody who is a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, 5-star prospect, top 15 by ESPN, McDonald's All-American, the whole thing. Had offers also in addition from USC, from Stanford and Tennessee and Alabama, Princeton, Ohio State, all the big schools, right? So she goes into the portal and she is now at UConn. And I think has just made the rich richer. And, I put out a couple weeks ago kind of a way too early top 25 post what we had already seen in the portal. And I put LSU at number 1 just because of who they had gotten and stuff. I think KayleighHeckel might push UConn back to number 1 for me. The numbers don't blow you away and stuff that she put up this past season, but she only played 15 minutes per game. But the potential is there for her, I think. When you just talk about now, like this backcourt depth that UConn is going to have, and depth isn't a thing that we've talked about a lot with UConn, but they're going to have AZ Fudd and KK Arnold and now KayleighHeckel all in the backcourt rotation. They're going to get a healthy Caroline Ducharme back. They got Sarah Williams from Wisconsin. Oh, yeah, and they got Sarah Strong, who was the best freshman in women's college basketball last season, and a lot of other pieces. They just have a really, really talented roster again, and I think KayleighHeckel just makes them even better. And so, yeah, she was kind of, I think, the last big domino to fall sort of in the transfer portal. I had her ranked in the top 40 of players available over at SB Nation. Yeah, big addition for the Fighting Gino Ariamas.
I hate that I'm about to say this, but how quick do you think coaches were in the DMs after that performance against Mississippi State? It sucks. It's the nature of the transfer portal. I don't care if it's women's basketball, college football. It's the reality, Mitch. You cover all the women's sports for SB Nation. Like, this is what happens. And I can almost guarantee you, because I heard about here in Jacksonville, UNF longtime head men's basketball coach Matthew Driscoll, shout out to Driscoll, is leaving for Kansas State.
Mm-hmm.
And from the moment it was announced there would be a change in leadership, I was told that multiple players within an hour had 5 coaches follow them on Twitter or X, DM them. It's just the nature of it. And
yeah,
if you're UConn, you adapt or die. And clearly they have, and they continue to rake in the portal and rake in traditional college recruiting as well.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've heard, some coaches don't even wait until the season is over. I was told that, one of the reasons why Elle Fortner retired from Georgia Tech was because a lot of her players were being tampered with as early as like back in late February. People sliding into DMs and, hey, you should come here and we can offer you this and A, B, C, and D and the whole thing. I mean, I'm even seeing it now. This is really my first year covering college softball as I'm kind of dipping my toes into some other sports at SB Nation. But the nation's leader in strikeouts from Belmont went into the transfer portal, and the nation's leader in hits from Boise State also went into the transfer portal. And so this is just the reality of like all college sports now. And it's pretty wild to see. And I don't really know if it gets fixed or if it needs to get fixed or what the solution is. Or I think as our friend Joe Giglio likes to say, like every sport is a year-to-year proposition now. And you just rebuild the roster every single year. And like every year is a new chance and every year is a reset and every year is a bag of new payments.
We will circle back to the transfer portal, or at the very least, someone who has already transferred as we round out this week's starting 5. But let's briefly dip our toe, Mitch, back into the WNBA. I am going to read this verbatim how I wrote it on the rundown because I was very proud of myself for writing it this way and not how many are discussing it on X right now or Blue Sky or wherever you find your social media content. The Chicago Sky, Mitch, are going to get the number 1 overall pick in a 2026 draft where Lauren Betts, a big, is the best player in the class when they already have 2 bigs as their cornerstones in Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. The roster construction of the Chicago Sky, folks, it's atrocious. I know that they are banking on, well, Tyler Marsh is going to develop Angel Reese into a shooting threat from the perimeter. Okay, cool. Ultimately, as of this juncture, Mitch, when you look at net rating right now, when you look at offensive, defensive rating in the WNBA, the New York Liberty are the number 1 rated team with a 16. You have to go all the way to the 8th spot of the 13 teams. The Las Vegas Aces, we'll circle back to them potentially here in a bit, who are negative 0.9 in net rating to get to a team that has a negative rating between their offensive and defensive efficiency. The Chicago Sky's net rating minus 29.8. It's been bad. It's really bad.
I laughed earlier because I've been hearing people talk about Angel Reese's potential to be an outside shooter ever since she left Maryland, and it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know that it actually needs to happen or that it ever will happen. Like, she's really, really, really good under the basket and in the paint. But like, when she left Maryland and went into the transfer portal, one of the things I heard was, oh, well, she wants to go somewhere where, she can step out and shoot the 3 and play along the perimeter. And I was like, so she went to play for Kim Mulkey, who like wants her bigs to play in a very traditional way. And so, she did not develop that way at LSU. Now she won a national title, which is great, and got that much better at rebounding and shooting around the rim and all that stuff. The Chicago Sky are a mess and like might be one of the worst run organizations, I think, in the WNBA. I still don't really understand why they fired Teresa Witherspoon.
Correct.
Especially considering how much goodwill she had amongst the players on that roster, the players who really, really liked her and believed in her. And it was year 1. And I don't know, maybe things work out with Tyler Marsh and maybe they don't. But Yeah, it's not looking good for the Sky. And yeah, as you head into the 2026 draft, if you do get if you may end up with the number one pick, that would be hilarious. I don't know what they would do. I guess they would
take Olivia Miles. Like,
I don't know.
I just hope this. You tell me, what have you thought of Courtney Vandersloot back in Chicago through 4 games? Because I've been underwhelmed, and I would like to see more Hailey Van Lith minutes. I don't want to say you're throwing the towel in and saying we're done with 2025 and we're already looking to 26. But in her debut, she had 4 points in 4 minutes. I at least want to see what she can do, with all due respect to Sloot.
Why is Courtney Vandersloot playing 29 minutes a game?
Correct.
Yes. She's very good, but she's been in the league a long time. And yeah, you just drafted a guard in the first round. Why did you spend a first round pick on Hailey Van Lith if you weren't going to play her?
They also traded a top 5 pick for Ariel Atkins. Never forget.
And how's that going?
Yeah. Well, Sonia Citron looks like the rookie of the year. So yeah, it's great. Everything is great.
I just things aren't good for the Sky. If they end up with the number one pick, that's going to be fascinating because it either means that they're going to trade Camila Cardoso or they're going to trade that pick back, I would assume, so they can take a guard. Because, whoever has that number one pick is probably going to take Lauren Betts. And I don't know how that would work if Lauren
They're just going to trot they're going to trot 3 6'7+ gals out there and just say, all right, we're going to clog the paint. This is 1994 and try to stop us.
Good luck, Sky.
And meanwhile, and look, I love Camila's story. Thought she was a great college player. But some of the clips that I've seen people clipping, and it's not that she's not putting effort out on the floor. This is just the style of play to which she has always played, which is she's a rim protector. She hangs around the rim. I saw a couple people questioning perhaps some effort on a potential rebound. But in that one play that I was looking at in their most recent game, like that's who she is. Like she's waiting for it to bounce off the rim and then collect the rebound. She's not going to hustle to the rack.
No, she's never been somebody who pursues the basketball.
No, and that's not. It's just who she is.
That's what Angel does really well.
Correct.
Camila is like, I'm taller and longer than everybody, and so therefore I can grab the ball above you, and that works really well a lot of the times in college when the players are often not as big as you. And the players are bigger and they're better and they're bigger and faster and stronger. And so it doesn't always work that way.
Just to close the loophole before we round out this week's starting 5, Mitch, last season with the Chicago Sky, Angel Reese shot 18.8% from 3-point range. Through the early goings of this year, 33.3%. Don't call it a comeback. By the way, her best 3-point shooting percentage in 4 years of college, 2 at Maryland, 2 at LSU, 18.2%. That was in her sophomore season with the Terps. Round us out with this week's starting 5. Speaking of LSU, tell me more about our friend MylasiaFulwiley.
Yeah, so DawnStaley has been doing the media rounds in the past week. Yeah, she has a new book out that she wrote that I was told she did not use a ghostwriter. And it is DawnStaley, unfiltered, writing about a lot of stuff. I bought a copy of the book this past weekend when I was in Columbia, went to a local bookstore there. It's called All Good Books. If you're ever in Columbia, go there. Good spot. Got a copy of the book. I flipped through it a little bit while I was standing in the bookstore and while my wife was shopping around. And the portion that I flipped to was her talking about the 1996 Olympic team. And she is very candid about how she felt about Tara Vanderveer in that book, talking about who Tara's favorites were and who Tara's favorites were not, and how Tara picked on Rebecca Lobo, and a lot.
I have to remember, I do have a Rebecca Lobo shout out. Thank you for reminding me in last call. Continue.
Lots of really interesting stuff in there. But she's done a lot of interviews and stuff. I think she was on the Daily Show, and she's done some morning shows and some night shows and all that good stuff. She went on the Breakfast Club, New York morning radio show hosted by Charlamagne the God, and they asked her about MylasiaFulwiley and kind of like how everything there unfolded, because I guess there's a portion of this book that I haven't read yet and haven't flipped to about MylasiaFulwiley and about Dawn's relationship with her. Dawn says this book was finished before this past season started, so it's not really reflective of Mylasia transferring, but I guess there are some honest, details in there about how she feels about Mylasia. They asked her if she was surprised about her transferring, and Dawn said, surprising? No. I think being in this space, you come to expect the unexpected. I still have much love for Mylasia, much love. I want her to be happy. Dawn said the way that the conversation with Mylasia after the season unfolded was basically she and her mom came into a post-game meeting or a postseason meeting with Staley, and Mylasia told her, I think I want to go into the transfer portal. To which Dawn said, you think or you know? And then the conversation kind of unfolded for there. And Dawn told her, this is what she told the Breakfast Club, don't look back. You're always going to be a Gamecock. You're always going to be welcomed here. I wish her the best. And when I say that, I really do. And then she said some other things about like how she really does believe like she is a generational talent. She said LSU is going to get the best of her now. We went through the hard part of smoothing some rough edges and getting her to create good habits. The playing time, the whatever, us maybe taking her out of the game when she felt like she wanted to keep playing through things. Now she probably questions that part of it, and I'm okay with that. A lot of players leave because of playing time. It's not for all the other stuff. We treat them like royalty. And then Charlemagne asked Dawn if she would give Kim Mulkey any tips on how to coach MylasiaFulwiley, to which Dawn responded with a laugh and said, you on your own. So I thought all that was very interesting.
Some might even say that would have qualified as a beef of the week if we didn't have another entrant, Mitchell. Well done. Well done. A little super sleuthing in a book score. And I know I have it literally pulled up on my for a week now. I've had Dawn's book, which of course is available on Simon & Schuster's website, who's the publisher, Uncommon Favor. And so you can order it right now. It does look like you can buy it from Amazon as well, but I was going to support my local production website.
The interview with the Breakfast Club, I think, is like on their Twitter and stuff. I think it's like 5 minutes long. It's just a clip about her really talking about MylasiaFulwiley, and it's pretty interesting. And like my takeaway was like she does genuinely feel like, you know, I love you, got much love for you, you know, mean it. But now you're on the other team, and you know when we meet on the court, like ain't no love there. So I'm very interested and really looking forward to the LSU South Carolina matchup this season.
Yes, what was spicy just got even spicier. You know what's spicy, Mitch? Beef.
Tell me.
Beef, especially when that beef involves one BG, BritneyGriner, or you watch, I'm trying to think, this game, I forget if it was Wednesday or Thursday night, the Atlanta Dream game or was it Friday on Ion, where Autumn Johnson was the sideline reporter.
I've seen the clip.
Okay, so you've seen the clip. We were watching it in real time here at my house, and it was on TV too, so we did not have audio on. And I think we had the Knicks game up on the main TV with the audio. And all of a sudden, I look over and I see Autumn's like smiling, holding the microphone as BG goes wandering over to the refs mid-interview. Autumn is clearly trying to get out of the interview. BG comes back and goes, no, let's continue the interview at halftime of the Atlanta Dream game, in which she was quoted as saying some certain things to the officials. No, not the things that she was quoted as saying when people lip read her on the bench. She was going after the officials instead. So yeah, easily this week's beef of the week has to go to BritneyGriner because she was taking no prisoners. And I would like to give Autumn Johnson a lot of kudos because she handled it with grace. And I've been there. When, you know, the talent or the player says some things that the FCC wouldn't be too fond of, and you're like, I got to get out of this, but the camera's still on, the red light's still on, so I got to keep performing. So thank you for our beef of the week, BG. We appreciate you.
Yeah, BG has been letting the colorful language fly, as you mentioned earlier. I would advise people who normally do not watch Brittney Griner play basketball to not try to read her lips. Looking at you, Riley Gaines. I
just don't know what's like AI either anymore with some of these people. Like, I'm like, is that actually the real video? Or because I know this, the Autumn Johnson, like that was the actual interview. Like that was real TV. I start texting my buddy Rebecca and I'm like, do you have audio on? She's like, no, I ran out to the store. I'm like, I need someone to tell me because no one clipped it initially. I need to know what the hell just happened on live television. And yeah, it was.
She was going in on the refs.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Which was also the context of that other clip that people were trying to lip read her. Like, she was mad at the refs, not mad at CaitlinClark. Everybody calm down.
Yes.
So yeah, BG letting it fly under Carl Smesko.
Also letting it fly from 3-point range. I'm here for her and Bree Jones and kind of this new look via Carl Smesko, something we've been talking about here on this podcast for months on end. And you're starting to see it, I think, with the Atlanta Dream. Could they be like a spicy team that is in the mix for a postseason berth, Mitch?
I think they're going to be a team that kind of like figures it out as they go. I have a lot of belief in Carl Smesko's like ability to figure it out and adapt and how to get kind of the best out of his players and what the system is going to be and stuff. I really like what I've seen out of Tina Pau. Small sample size so far. BritneyGriner and Brianna Jones kind of adapting to some different roles in terms of letting 3-pointers fly every now and then. Brianna Jones has been really good for them. She's averaging a double.
She looks great from 3 in the 2 Dream games that I've watched live. Like, she looks awesome from long distance, which I don't think you would have been saying a few years ago about her.
Yeah. And BG is BG. She's, still an all-star. Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard, I think Alicia Gray is playing really well.
Yeah.
And Ryan Howard, I think, is figuring things out in a new system. So yeah, I just kind of have faith in them to figure it out. And like, if they snuck into the playoffs, that wouldn't shock me.
You have faith. You are encouraged by the Atlanta Dream. What team you're most concerned about, though, Mitch? That's on the other side. Let's take a quick break, though, first, and let our friends know about our other friends at the Sports Podcast Festival. Yes, folks, it is returning to the Triangle August 23rd at the Rialto in Raleigh. My good friend Richard Johnson and Split Zone Duo, the Stars, alongside our friends Ovius and Gilio. Of course, Big Screen Sports will also join the party. So that's 3 podcasts, 1 location, the Rialto, August 23rd in Raleigh, North Carolina. Split Zone Duo, Ovius and Gilio, Big Screen Sports. Tickets are $59. There is also an option to buy a ticket and reserve. I wore this just for the occasion, Mitch. Your home field long sleeve tee. I am rocking the Sports Podcast Festival sweatshirt from Home Field.
I'm wearing a home field hat.
We are rocking the Home Field Apparel. We love our friends at Home Field Apparel. Be sure to check out therialto.com or eTix to get your tickets for the Sports Podcast Festival. Mitch, did you attend last year?
I did. It was a lot of fun. Last year we had shut down Full Cast and Hand in the Dirt and Ovius and Gilio. Really a lot of fun. Really good night. I've also been to a Split Zone Duo live show up in DC, which is a whole lot of fun. Love listening to those guys talk college football. And yeah, Home Field's going to be there, and they make really comfy shirts and other fun college apparel. So yeah, come out to Raleigh, hang out with us. And what better way to spend week 0?
It was 98 degrees at Jaguars practice today. I got home. I was still sticky, but I wanted to rock the Sports Podcast Festival sweatshirt. And I'm not going to lie, Mitch, doesn't matter how sticky I felt. You put one of these Home Field Apparel babies on, all your worries, all the stickiness, it goes away. So long as you're in AC, but that's a story for another time. That's right. It is time for this week's main event. My big question for you, Mitch, what team in the W 2 weeks into the season are you most concerned about? And because we just spent about 5 minutes on them, you cannot say the Chicago Sky.
I think my top 2 choices would probably be the Chicago Sky and the Dallas
they're my number
Wings,
1, 2, so that's why we're taking them out.
And the Dallas Wings, who I've already talked about why I'm concerned with them. So the other team that I would kind of look at is that are off to a slow start are the Las Vegas Aces. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not sure really what's up there with the Aces. Where they're 2-2 to start the season. We had a loss at Seattle. We had a double-digit loss to the Liberty. I guess the Seattle loss was about double digits too. So a 14-point loss at the Liberty, a 20-point loss at Seattle. That's not the usual like Death Star Las Vegas Aces that we're accustomed to. And I kind of wonder just what exactly is going on there. A'ja Wilson is still playing really, really well. She's averaging a double-double, playing great. Jackie Young is putting up some really good numbers. I think that the backcourt is some concern. Maybe they're missing Kelsey Plum. Maybe I don't know. I'm not sure. What have you seen from the Aces?
I have seen a team that is still leaning into, for lack of a better term, the old way. And by old way, I mean the mid 2000s, late 2010s way of thinking of, let me build a super team. And if my starting five is better than your starting five, we will find a way to win. I think that, and look, bias or not, like saying goodbye to Kate Martin, saying goodbye to Kelsey Plum, even if that was a loaded backcourt, I think that both those moves, if only on May the 27th, as we're recording this podcast, it appears to be a mistake. Letting names like Sid Colston, letting Tiffany Hayes walk. I think you are starting to see the effects of not having that depth, not having a 1 through 10 lineup that may not be elite, but you have the best player in the game and you have enough pieces that you can keep those top 5 players fresh. I think a lot of it has to deal with depth. I think even more of it, to your point, does have to deal with, since this was making its way on the rounds on social media this weekend, A'ja Wilson leads this team in every statistical category as of this podcast being recorded, or at the very least earlier this weekend. She led them in points. She led them in rebounds. She did lead them in assists. And that has sparked a lot of conversation, if only among women's basketball fans. And look, I think that we'll see how the season plays out, but I would not be surprised, Mitch, if this continues at the pace that it's at. Let's go back to those net ratings that I read off earlier. The Aces are 8th, minus 0.9 in net rating. If this continues, if they make the postseason, but they're one and done, I think that there is a case to be made of potentially not blowing it up, because I don't think A'ja Wilson's going anywhere, but saying, okay, we need to lean into the next iteration of what the Las Vegas Aces around A'ja Wilson are going to be. And since I heard this on No Off Season on the Athletic Women's Basketball podcast, shout out to the folks over there, Jackie Young did change her representation this past off season, and now has the same agent as Kelsey Plum. I'm not saying that she's going to follow Kelsey Plum to LA, but what I am saying, Brian Windhorst meme, is that when you switch your representation, whether that's in the the NBA, the NFL, that typically means that's because the wheels are starting to turn about, hey, how do I get my next deal?
How do I capitalize on what is to come for me? Yeah, and I think if Jackie Young were to leave the Aces, I think that would maybe open up the door for a larger rebuild there. Just kind of looking at their roster currently constructed this season, I'm looking at some numbers. I see that Kaya Stokes has been their starting center. She's playing 18 minutes a game. She has not scored a single point this season.
Yes, which was an issue last year too, by the way. And that was why they ended up at some junctures last summer having to start Kate Martin, just because Kia Stokes gives them no offensive firepower. And they have not come up with a solution for the 5.
So, I mean, you have Elizabeth Kitley, who I'm pretty sure, she's the ACC's all-time leading rebounder. I don't think she's the ACC's all-time leading scorer, but she's Virginia Tech's all-time leading scorer. I've seen Elizabeth Kitley play a lot of basketball games over the past couple of years. Elizabeth Kitley is capable of scoring, and she's 6'6" and is capable of playing, I think, in the WNBA. Why not try her? Let's give Elizabeth Kitley some minutes and see if she can give you some offense from the center position. She's also somebody that can protect the rim and probably do all the things that Kia Stokes does. I'm not going to pretend to be a better coach than Becky Hammond, but let's try some things here. Let's call Smesco this a little bit. Let's see what sticks,
or Princeton offense it like the Washington Mystics.
Right. Yeah. So I just feel like if, you've had a lot of, like you said, the depth on this team has diminished quite a bit because of all the offseason moves. You mentioned everybody who's left. But there are still some adjustments to be made here. Like, you're not just stuck with the roster that you have. I know that Megan Gustafson is hurt, and if she was healthy, they would give her some run at center. But you do have Elizabeth Kitley sitting right there, and like there's a reason why you kept her around a year beyond her injury that she had to sit out for last year. So let's see what she's got.
I agree with you in terms of teams that I am most worried about 2 weeks into the W season. The Chicago Sky, undoubtedly number one. The Dallas Wings, number two. The Las Vegas Aces, number three. And for the sake of the conversation, I will introduce a fourth team. And while I'm not worried about them because they do have the player who Mitch and I believe will lead the W in scoring when all is said and done, in Kelsey Plum, I am worried about the Los Angeles Sparks solely because people keep getting hurt. In case you missed it, in addition to Cam Brink, still recovering from her ACL tear, has been with the team at different junctures, is expected back at some point in mid-May. In the opener, Ray Burrell suffers a right leg injury. She's out 6 to 8 weeks. Rakea Jackson suffered a concussion, so she will now miss extended time. I saw a tweet floating around of like they're the most beautiful bench, all in their street clothes, and they're all so pretty, and they could all be models. But also, those are three of your better players, and they are not available. And what is the best ability, Mitch? Availability. And I just wonder how sustainable it is for Kelsey Plum to continue to literally carry a team night in and night out.
Kelsey Plum second in the WNBA in scoring right now.
Coming for you, Asia. Coming for you.
Points per game. Nafisa Collier is ahead of her.
Fee's now
29.5 points per game. I mean, just starting the season off on a heater. I don't think that scoring is maybe sustainable for Fee, but we'll see. I still like my pick.
I think Fee has other options on the floor that she can distribute the ball to, who can also score. The Sparks do not have that option. They have to run their offense through Kelsey Plum.
Kelsey Plum might be jacking up a lot of threes. Yeah.
Which would be good for Mitch's bet. But anywho, yes, we have concerns. Los Angeles Sparks. No, not about the sideline attire. You're all beautiful. We love you, Sparks. You're so pretty. But please get back soon. Please get healthy, because we don't want to include you in this list of teams that we are concerned about in this week's main event. Speaking of a segment that we love, we're bringing it back because the W season is in full swing. You heard us every week during the college hoop season with our chef's table, our games to watch. It's back. Mitch, lead us off with the appetizer this week in what we should be viewing.
Yeah, so first up, this is Wednesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV. It's the Indiana Fever versus the Washington Mystics in Baltimore, Maryland. Shout out to the O's, who have been not good this season, but nonetheless, hopefully the good folks of Baltimore get to watch some good basketball on Wednesday night. This is interesting kind of for all the reasons that we've already talked about. You know, the Mystics are off to a pretty good start this season. And I would like to see Kiki Iriafin go kind of mano-a-mano with Leah Boston. I think that would be a lot of fun. Also, we're just kind of watching to see how the Fever play without CaitlinClark. And so, like, while it's a bummer for all the folks in Baltimore that don't get to see CaitlinClark play, I'm interested to see how the Fever manage without her and what kind of things they do in the backcourt in her absence. So that is our appetizer to kind of kick us off this week.
I love it. Also of note, as we look at the top scorers in the W, yes, Fee leads the way at 29.5 points per game, then Kelsey Plum. How about Brittany Sykes? For those who maybe haven't been watching the Mystics, what's happening there? Because I feel like Sonia Citron's getting all the pub. Kiki, again, in case you missed it, 4 double-doubles in her first 5 career games. But Brittany Sykes out here turning back the clock a little bit too.
Brittany Sykes also 8th in the league in assists, 5.0 per game. So yeah, she's having a great year. Brittany Sykes was on the 2018 Atlanta Dream Squad that I covered when I lived in Atlanta. It was Nikki Collins' first season, and she was just so fun to talk to and just a joy to cover. So happy to see her playing well. Career high, 22.3 points per game. Her career high for a season is 15.9. So yeah, this is an awesome year for her.
Litmus test for the Mystics as they face the Fever, even if they are Caitlin-less. How about the main entree, Mitch?
Yeah, this is 2 of our troubled teams going at
Loser leaves town. Many are asking.
This is Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern on Ion. The Los Angeles Sparks at the Las Vegas Aces, the revenge return game for Kelsey Plum. This will be interesting. This is Kelsey Plum going up against her old team. She's going to be looking to score a lot of points, not just so the Sparks can win, but because the Sparks don't have a lot of options, as Mia previously mentioned. So this is going to be a good one to watch on Friday night.
And good bounce back opportunity for the Aces to flip the script on what we are saying on this week's episode, much like the Indiana Fever did last week when we christened them as the greatest thing since sliced bread. They promptly lost to the Atlanta Dream, although I do think they're just a bad matchup. Story for another time. Aces, prove us wrong. I want to see that you're back in championship form. Let's round it out with this week's dessert.
Yeah, I think this might be a future playoff matchup. We'll see. This is going to be next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN3. This is the Phoenix Mercury at the Minnesota Lynx. The Mercury are off to a 3-1 start. Pretty solid start to the season for them. Satu Sabally, 19.8 points per game. Alyssa Thomas is doing all the Alyssa Thomas things. I don't know how sustainable this is for the Mercury. I just don't know if I totally believe in their roster. Also, Kalia Copper is still hurt and wearing very large suits on the sidelines for reasons unknown. And
she's also trying to turn back the clock, but that's in a fashion sense.
Sure, yes. She's doing the 2001 NBA draft style, like the Kwame Brown sort of suits. I think the Minnesota Lynx are really, really good. So this will be kind of a little bit of a measuring stick kind of game for the Phoenix Mercury in terms of how good they can be. I'm also just looking forward to kind of, Satu Sabally playing the way that she's playing right now, going up against somebody like Nafisa Collier. I think that'll be an interesting matchup.
Shout out Kwame Brown. Shout out Brunswick, Georgia. Shout out Glenn Academy. To recap this week's Chef's Table, the games that you need to be locked in and watching are appetizer, the Fever versus the Mystics in Baltimore. That tips off Wednesday at 7:30 on NBA TV. The main entree, the Los Angeles Sparks, the Las Vegas Aces, Friday night on Ion, the second game of that Friday night doubleheader, the Kelsey Plum revenge game. And finally, the dessert, Phoenix at Minnesota, Tuesday on ESPN 3. Does that say, Mitch, at 8 p.m.? I didn't know ESPN 3 was still hanging around.
Yeah, that's what it says on ESPN's website. I assume that just means you can go to the Watch ESPN or ESPN Plus, and it'll be there.
Still better than Baller TV. Let's hit last call. Lead us off, Mitch. What do we have cooking? What did we miss on today's program?
I don't have a lot for last call, but I see that you have written here. It just says Rebecca Lobo, Joe Biden.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yep. I mentioned earlier that I had a Rebecca Lobo shout out when you were discussing DawnStaley, just leaving it all out there. Tara Vanderveer, evidently not a fan of Rebecca Lobo, who I think is one of the nicest people. I feel like we shout her out in last call every week for something zany that she does. So I'm scrolling on social media last week, and Rebecca Lobo evidently was on a walk in her neighborhood. And while she was on her walk, she saw Joe Biden's motorcade, or what she believes to be Joe Biden's motorcade, go past her house as she was walking back to her house. And so she stood outside her house next to her minivan and started waving. And and then she posted about it and said, I wonder if Joe Biden saw me and said, oh, I should take a picture. There's Rebecca Lobo in her minivan, as Rebecca Lobo was there saying, there's Joe Biden in his motorcade. And I just thought that was oh so sweet. I also don't know why Joe Biden, which we're praying for the former president. But obviously, I don't know why he was up in Connecticut as he battles cancer, but evidently he's hanging out in Rebecca Lobo's neighborhood. And she also is like the ultimate AAU basketball mom. So if you don't follow Rebecca on social, you should, because the vibes are immaculate on her IG story.
I have some bad news for Rebecca Lobo. I don't think Joe Biden knows who she is.
There are other jokes I can make, but I'm going to refrain.
He didn't recognize George Clooney.
Yeah.
It just, shout out to Uncle Joe and everything. But
shout out to Uncle Joe. Shout out to Rebecca Lobo and her minivan. Her minivan needs more love. And also, I hope you find another bunk bed on your travels this W season somewhere. Although I think they only exist in hotel rooms in Iowa City. Let's be real here, Mitch. What do you have cooking over at SB Nation this week?
I've been writing a lot about the NCAA softball tournament. I got some stuff up about UCLA beating South Carolina. at the Super Regional. Got some stuff about Carlin Pickens doing some great things. Pitcher for Tennessee that threw the fastest pitch in college softball this year. I also wrote about, like, since we mentioned Joe Biden and kind of dipping into politics here, there is if you've been kind of paying attention to the broader news, maybe you're listening to some NPR, whatever it is, the Trump administration is kind of taking aim at Harvard. And I mention this because if what he is trying to do comes to pass, it could impact their women's basketball team, which made the NCAA tournament this past year and won the Ivy League tournament in a big way. I mean, essentially, they're trying to ban international students from Harvard, and it would affect more than 7,000 students, and it would affect a lot of student athletes there, including 2 women's basketball players, including a starter on that team. So I wrote about that at SB Nation. If you want to learn more, you can go there and check that out. But it's something to keep an eye on.
If I had to guess, this is just another example of art of the deal. It won't come to pass, and Trump will parade himself around. But I digress. That's a little too much from me. We just want to focus on Rebecca Lobo and Joe Biden and the wonderful minivan meetup, as well as Mitch's wonderful work over at SB Nation. We appreciate you guys tuning in to this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast. I wish I had more to say, but that's last call. We will catch you guys same time, same place next week. We'll catch you later.
Deuces.